Well, hello. I'm Rebecca Ray, and I have the privilege of leading the U.S. Human Capital Center for the Conference Board, and I am absolutely delighted today to join you and also my good colleague, Dr. Solange Charras, in sharing with you the brand new opportunity and offering that you have as a valued member of the Conference Board. As you can see, Solange is the founder and CEO of HC Moneyball. And the wonderful platform that we're going to be talking about today, HCMetrix, is part of the suite of offerings from HC Moneyball. So Solange and I have partnered in our respective teams, and she and her very generous team have given and created a great new product for you. And I'm excited not only for the partnership and the gratefulness for the partnership, but also the opportunity to explain today what lies ahead. Solange, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Well, if I could, I want to just step back for a moment and just say that what we're about to share today around human capital metrics is part of a suite of tools that are brand new, and we're very excited about it. And so if you've already discovered my TCB, which I hope so, that's the brand new refresh of our website. And so when you sign in as a member, we have curated many of the experiences and offerings that are particular to you and the things that you've told us over time you're interested in, as well as great new opportunities for you. So when you visit my TCB, you can see on the blue bar there, data and benchmarking. And so when you click data and benchmarking, the first things that you'll see are these three offerings. And just very briefly, HCMetrix, which we'll talk more about in a moment. There's the organizational guidance system, which is powered by RBL AI, and the ROI repository for human capital investments, and that's powered by the ROI Institute. So if you were to click data and benchmarking, you would see then that you have the opportunity to click through to HCMetrix, and that's where we're going to focus today. So let me share with you our agenda. I want to talk just a little bit about human capital analytics, why it matters, why we should care. I'm going to ask Solange to share more of the benefits and the functioning of this great new platform. She'll share with you some of the analytics and correlations, particularly at the program level. We'll talk a little bit about the process. We'll share some about how you actually take advantage of this opportunity. And this, of course, will be a recording that we leave in perpetuity on the landing page so that you can refresh and also share. So let me begin by saying that this is a brand new tool. There are 2 seats that are available to each of the member organizations at the Human Capital Center. We have already reached out to the lead executive, most often it's the CHRO at your organization, and asked that they would share with us who might be the right person to be in that second chair, perhaps the head of analytics, perhaps the head of talent acquisition or DEI or some other function, whatever works for that organization. And so those 2 seats would be given to the 2 people who can best leverage this platform on behalf of the organization. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think everyone who is a human capital member organization should be able to understand what the tools are that are available and to support colleagues in completing some of these opportunities. So we've been looking at human capital analytics for a long time. And here are just 3 of the most recent reports that talk about benchmarking or ROI or the use of analytics and how that can have a tremendous impact on human capital decision-making and also disclosure, which we'll see in a moment is going to become increasingly a larger piece of the human capital puzzle. One I would point out is the Brave New World report, which Solange was the lead author on. And she and I and others, Paul Washington at the ESG Center, for example, and Amy Abel in the human capital area, took a look at human capital management from a board perspective, from a governance perspective, and trying to look at how organizations need to be thinking about the narrative they want to tell and the analytics they need to master to be able to shape the narrative for the public and particularly for the investor class. So it matters. And here's what we also know. We know that the total cost of the workforce is often more than half of an operating expense. And so improving the human capital costs and expenditures can also have a material difference for an organization, particularly in terms of its finances. Now, this materiality issue, I'm going to ask Solange to speak to in a little bit later in the slides. But what we know is that a 10% increase in human capital ROI can have a an outsized impact on EBITDA. So HC Moneyball has developed a custom portal for you called HCMetrix, and it's for the specific purpose of helping you measure, monitor, and maximize your investment in human capital, both in terms of the hard dollar costs of people as well as programs. Now, before you begin to think that you'd have to go on a scavenger hunt to bring all this together, every organization can leverage the data that you already have and to be able to seamlessly and elegantly, it's a very simple and elegant list of things we'd be asking you to provide, and it can provide a myriad of analytics for to support your efforts. So here's the kinds of things that are going to be available to you. First of all, this is unique in the marketplace. It ties human capital metrics with corporate financial performance. And from that, you get a robust series of data points, and it can help you determine materiality, which we'll see in a few moments is going to become increasingly more important. There are interactive dashboards that can help you gain insights. It can be exported. Many times, I remember when I was a Chief Talent Officer, you wanted to make your own presentations internally, and the ability to export data and have that become part of your presentation deck is very important. You'll be able to benchmark capabilities, particularly among companies in your same SIC code. It is, as I mentioned, exportable not only for dashboards, but also in reports. It's a simple and elegant process. You don't have to create new data or go on scavenger hunts to get things. And it is on demand. It's in compliance with international standards, particularly the SEC, which is not as robust as some so far, but it will become so. And we know that ISO has been at the forefront of much of this discussion, particularly out of Europe. And Solange has been very involved in many of those conversations, serving in many of those boards as well. So I'm going to suggest that we spend just a moment to now walk through in detail the benefits and the features of the platform. And Solange, I'm going to ask you to walk us through that.
Sure. Thank you, Rebecca, for allowing me to explain the benefits of the HCMetrix platform to the conference board members. As Rebecca said, the concept of understanding the materiality of human capital is becoming increasingly important, and more pressure is going to be put on you to really understand the materiality of your human capital in the organization. And so at the top line, we've designed this platform to allow you to instantly calculate these indicators of materiality that you can monitor and track and benchmark over time. What's important is not just understanding your performance at one point of time, but to actually track, monitor, and benchmark that performance month by month so that you can either communicate to your executive management and your board and or your other stakeholders how you're doing in terms of human capital efficiency. But it can also give you advanced warning. It can give you some signals so that you can take action on the trends that you're observing in your organization. So at the macroeconomic level, we want to help you understand materiality, track, monitor, and benchmark that. Then we can go one level down from the top line level and actually look at program level impact. So you might have a hypothesis or a query or a concern about the relationship between your training investment and how that impacts attrition or retention. This platform will allow you to connect those two human capital data points and also be able to connect how the performance in those areas is actually resulting in financial performance. So this platform is the first of its kind platform that allows you to mix and match different types of data into one visual representation. And that will give you a lot of insights about the impact of human capital management on enterprise level performance. We also allow you to take even a further deeper dive into specific programs. For example, we've listed here diversity and equity. We're going to be launching that capability in Q3, and you will be able to really understand not only just the diversity indicators within your organization, but also be able to calculate and understand your equity performance on things like pay equity, or your organization's training equity. Are you providing training in an unbiased manner across the board to all levels in all areas of the organization? So we want to help you understand those kinds of trends and patterns in your organization. So the platform use is pretty straightforward. You're going to input some data, and in a second, I'll show you what the data collection worksheet looks like. We are very committed to not making organizations create new data. We don't ask you to interview your executives. We don't want to interview your executives. We don't require that you survey your employees. All the data that's required to have a minimum viable product for this platform exists in data that you already have within your HRIS system and within your financial ERP system. Also, please know that we don't ask you to include or upload any individual level data. There's no room in the platform to add individual data. This is not a talent management platform. This is a human capital data analytics platform. And in that way, we don't risk any issues around data security or privacy. So we are completely GDPR compliant. Once your data is uploaded into the system, you'll be able to instantly understand some relationships within your data by being able to drag and drop both raw data and calculated values into dashboards, and they graph automatically for you. So as I said, if you have some hypotheses about the relationship between certain programs and certain measurable outcomes, you don't have to ask an analyst to start analyzing that information. You just drag and drop the metrics and the indicators, and you can visually see whether or not there is a correlation between those data elements. So we're transforming data into standard metrics. As Rebecca said, we use algorithms in the system to calculate those metrics that are ISO based. So it's the International Standards Organization 3414 standard, where we use the algorithms to calculate data. It's completely transparent. We're trying to generate consistency across organizations so that you will be able to compare apples to apples when you start benchmarking data. And again, you'll gain a lot of insights when you start visualizing your data trends and benchmarking those trends.
Solange, if we could just linger on that last slide for just a moment. What I love about this opportunity is when you take a look at this process, all the work that we did at the end of last year in terms of working with law firms, board members, people who were of the investor class, also the sitting CHROs as part of that larger executive group. We tried to put together a framework, which I think is fairly unique in the marketplace, on how you need to think about board governance of human capital management. And this platform, as it's designed, really helps to make that report, that research, that outcome from more than 100 experts actionable, to bring it to life. And I am so grateful and so excited about this. I think this is wonderful. Thank you. And one of the things that I was so pleased to see is that we went out to a lot of our core constituencies across the human capital spectrum, and we asked them, what kinds of things do you struggle with? What would be helpful? What do you want to know? What kinds of questions does your board ask you? Does your CEO ask you? Your EC colleagues ask you? And in several of these areas, they're very specific kinds of examples. And so I want to share with you in the next slide just a few of the examples in a couple of these categories. So we asked folks in the total reward space what kinds of things they were looking to solve for or to be better and more insightful about. A lot of it was around short-term and long-term compensation. It was about pay equity. a lot in there on how effective was the rewards approach at explaining, retention and attrition. And, these are the things our member executives told us they struggled with. And so let me show you a couple of other examples on the next slide in several of the other categories, just to name a couple. So in talent acquisition was how diverse is the pipeline and how dependent is the organization on contract workers. And you can see that the number of human capital and financial metrics that are at the intersection of conversations that CHROs are now having with CFOs and the board. In learning and development, we want to know whether or not learning and development programs are consistently offered to people across the organization. We want to know what's the return on investment for investments in leadership development, for example, against financial performance. And then especially in the diversity, equity, inclusion area, it's what are the organizations looking at in terms of the composition of the diversity across their ranks, also looking to see where pay equity gaps may exist, and also looking to see whether or not they are offering training and development or leadership on an equitable basis. So these are the kinds of things that our executives told us they were concerned about being able to solve for. And I'm thrilled that this platform has been purpose-built with Solange and the team's help at HC Moneyball to offer that. So, well, thank you, Solange. Would you mind taking us through now and showing us, some of the, I like to call it, and you've heard me say this before, elegant but simple list of metrics that people would provide. And it's amazing to me how much can be gleaned from a relatively short data set.
Yeah, absolutely. So we keep saying it's a relatively small data set, and with up to 28 data points, you can have a minimum viable product that will allow you to do hundreds of dashboards in different combinations and address, your hypotheses or your queries or your concerns about the relationship between human capital and corporate financial performance, or even different human capital programs within the HR function. We think of it, as I said before, at two different levels: the macro analytic level or the macroeconomic level, which is the level of information that public companies will have to disclose pretty soon. Right now, the SEC is saying that if human capital is material, then you need to disclose, and that's a principles-based approach. It's hard for organizations to really understand whether or not their human capital is material. So we're actually giving you the tools to be able to determine that. And with the new chairman of the SEC, Gary Gensler, we believe that the SEC is going to move from a principles-based to a rules-based approach so that every public company will have to disclose certain human capital analytics. These analytics were covered in the Brave New World report. And we believe that the 5 major metrics that we discussed in the Brave New World report will be included in the new SEC guidelines. Those guidelines haven't been disclosed yet, but we believe that it's soon to be announced that they're going to be required disclosures. Our platform allows you to calculate those metrics using the guidelines that the SEC is going to be announcing, so that you don't have to scramble to try to figure out what goes in and what stays out of those calculations. It will be automatically done for you. So the subscriber will be able to quantify, track, and most importantly, benchmark your macroeconomic performance indicators that include HCROI, which is human capital return on investment, HCVA, human capital value add, and the rest of the spaghetti here, HEVA, HCMV, and the like, and be able to correlate that to overall company financial performance, EBITDA, revenue, expense performance, even net promoter score, if that's data that you want to put into the system. So we allow you the flexibility to understand what you're trying to measure and how you're trying to correlate that to corporate financial outcomes. The data collection worksheet is relatively straightforward. Here's a picture of it. You can see that it's divided into 2 fundamental sections: financial data and then human capital data or employee population and cost data. If you are a public company, you can use your publicly disclosed financial information. All of those data lines, those data points are actually included in a public company disclosure statement. So if you don't want to involve your CFO, or your CFO has some questions, the data, again, if you're publicly traded, we can curate that data and include it into the platform. The data that's publicly disclosed is on a quarterly basis. We'd love for you to be able to provide that data on a monthly basis. It will help you understand the correlation between your human capital performance and your corporate financial performance if you can track it on a monthly basis. The employee population and cost data should really be at your fingertips. If you have an HRIS system, you can just run queries and run reports to populate this information. Again, we want data at the aggregate level. So your total salary, your total short-term incentive cost, your total long-term incentive cost. And that will help you understand how those measures correlate to corporate financial performance, or how your investment in human capital is generating human capital outcomes against your KPIs. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is that your data is held in confidence, right? So only, as Rebecca said, 2 people in your organization can actually access the platform. We use a tier 4 security architecture in our data site. And so it's highly secure. We do not share your data with anyone. Your data will be added to a confidential database after we anonymize the data. So we can't actually go in and pluck out your data from the database. So please know that your data is perfectly secure in our system. We also, as I said, allow you to benchmark data. In the conference board version of the platform, you will be able to identify your organization's SIC code and then benchmark your macroeconomic level data, the HCROI, the HEVA, the HCVA data against all companies within your SIC code. Again, we load every public company's data into our database, our platform, and we use the same algorithm to calculate the metrics. So we will be comparing apples to apples. And when you benchmark your data, you know that you're getting reliable and valid benchmarking information. If you don't know what your SIC code is, there are ways to get it. You can go to the siccode.com, type in your company name, and it will tell you what SIC code your company is filing its financials to the SEC under. So I thought it would be useful to basically give you some snapshots of the kinds of things that you can do within the platform. I've got a few slides that show the macroeconomic performance indicators and a few slides that show you the program level indicators of the kinds of things that you can do. Our objective is for you to gain value by using the platform, and that value will lead to insights. Those insights lead to better decision making. One of the things that we found in our in our accelerating value report, which is also pictured on that page with the 3 reports, is that organizations that consistently use human capital analytics as part of their human capital management processes actually have much higher performance on HCROI than organizations that don't. And when I mean organizations, I mean the conference board organizations. So we surveyed our conference board members, and based on the results that we got, we were able to analyze that data and understand these trends. What we found was that organizations that use human capital analytics as part of their management processes achieve an HCROI of almost 3 times higher than organizations that don't. So even if you don't care about materiality, even if you're not using this to disclose or report to your board or your C-suite, you probably should be thinking about using this just to manage your human capital function and achieve those kinds of higher efficiencies and returns.
Solange, if I may, that for those who are listening in, that means that whether or not you are a publicly traded company, this is an important tool.
Exactly. It creates insights for better decision making.
Yeah. And while I have you and I've interrupted here, could I just ask? I'm sure there are some people who may have wanted to ask a little earlier, how this is GDPR compliant, and I just thought perhaps we could mention that. I know, part of the beauty of it is it's aggregate data, but nevertheless, might you speak to that?
Sure. GDPR is designed to protect the individual's data. It's a privacy issue. And if we are not asking for individual data points, we are not violating any one employee's privacy. So when the data is in the aggregate, we don't have an issue. And individuals don't have to opt out because we're not actually sharing any of their personal identifiable information. Okay, so let me just speak briefly to this little chart. What we've done with this dashboard is we're tracking an organization's EBITDA performance, which is in the green bar, and benchmarking it to the benchmark EBITDA performance for the companies within their SIC code. So those are the two bars. The green bar is the company, the blue bar is the benchmark. And if I were a CFO and I was only looking at the green bars, I would say, oh, we're doing well, because for the period between March of 2019 and June of 2020, our EBITDA performance went from 4 million all the way up to about 6 million. And that's a happy story. But if I benchmark my performance against the competitor group, I can see a very different picture emerging. And as a CFO, as a CEO, as a C-suite executive, or even as the board, I'm a little less enthusiastic about this performance because the gap between my performance and the benchmark has widened over that period of time. And I would want to understand why. I would ask the question, why is our EBITDA performance trailing the benchmark? And we're assuming that the benchmarks didn't change, so we're comparing apples to apples. And I want to understand that. Company HCROI is a measure of how much return an organization is receiving for every dollar they invest in human capital. Again, this is not an algorithm that we've created. It is an algorithm that is approved by the ISO 3414 standard, and it is an algorithm that's been used in academic research for about 40 years. So it's been consistently studied, and we have a standard algorithm for that. This organization's HCROI went from about $5 at the beginning of the performance period, which means that for every dollar they invested in human capital, they got a $5 return. And over that measurement period, the HCROI dropped to about $4. So you can see the scale on the right-hand side shows the HCROI value. And at the same time, the benchmark HCROI went from about $4, a little more than $4, up to almost $5.50. So our benchmark is doing better on HCROI than we are. And maybe that accounts for this lag in EBITDA performance, since company HCROI is directly related to EBITDA performance. So it's an opportunity for you to understand, how do I turn that trend around? How do I go back to a higher company HCROI performance? And how do I investigate what goes into that HCROI calculation? So we're giving you the opportunity to actually figure out where to look, and then the platform will actually give you the opportunity to unpack that performance program by program. This particular chart is showing you human capital revenue and expense factor. So human capital revenue factor is often called productivity. It's revenue divided by full-time equivalents. And the human capital expense factor is operating expense divided by full-time FTE, full-time equivalent, so that you can actually understand the per employee performance around revenue and expense. We're also looking at total human capital costs and EBITDA performance. So we've really packed this chart to try to understand some trends. And what we're seeing is that the blue line and the orange line are sort of moving together. So our revenue factor and our expense factor are moving closely together, which means that our expenses and our revenues are tracking, and human capital is not really impacting it very much. But we're also looking at the human capital expense, the total expense, against EBITDA performance. And we're seeing that our expense is going up and our EBITDA is going down towards the end of this measurement period. So again, we're reinforcing that relationship. Again, we're trying to give you some value by helping you understand what elements go together and then provide some insights that you can take action on. This last chart that we're showing you looks at human capital direct costs to full-time equivalents. And you can see in the end of the measurement period from March 20 to June 20, our total full-time employees equivalents has gone way up, and our total compensation costs have gone up, but not as dramatically as we expected. And our total benefits and total retirement costs look like they've gone kind of flat. So how do we unpack that? How do we interpret that? Well, one place to look is to see whether or not you're just hiring more contractors, right? And the FTE is reflecting the number of contractors you have, or even part-timers that you have that wouldn't be eligible for benefits or retirement contributions. So maybe that's something to look at. The next place to look is to look at the contractors and see whether or not they're creating or contributing to this higher level of FTEs and also the higher total comp cost. Again, we're providing ways for you to know where to look to test your hypothesis so that you can better manage your human capital function. I also indicated that we can look down into the programs and then look at the impact of human capital program against human capital KPIs or desired outcomes. So it's a more granular look at the programs where we can look at headcount, attrition, retention, training, and then see how they either those programs support one another or how they support the organization. And here's a picture of attrition. So we're looking at total full-time equivalents in the red bars, and then the number of employees separating total employees. And then we can break out the number of voluntary separations versus the number of involuntary separations and see if we can understand what's going on here. With this particular organization in August of 20, we know why their FTEs went up. With this particular company did an acquisition, and so they acquired a lot of people. And now we're looking at the normalization of how they've integrated that headcount into their organization. And they've done, as you can see, some involuntary separations, some headcount reductions in January of 21, because you can see that the red line is sort of spiking, and the voluntary separations look like they're pretty flat. So that's good for them, right? So you can, in one chart, really track and monitor what's going on in your organization. This last chart shows you a picture of your employee generational profile. So if you wanted to really understand the composition of your full-time equivalent headcount based on the different generations, you can do that as well. And that may give you some insights on how you want to manage your offerings, your program offerings. If you know that your millennial and your Gen X headcount are going up, you might want to take that into consideration when you think about the kinds of programs that you want to offer that employee population segment. So let me quickly go through the process. So there's a process, obviously, and then there's a benefit flow for the subscriber. You want to collect and upload your data into the system. And then basically after that, everything happens in the background. So we calculate values. We allow you to look at raw data as well as calculated data, which we call metrics. We allow you to analyze your human capital investment, your human capital performance around materiality indicators. You can create dashboards to create those visual representations and then understand how human capital performance is actually correlated to corporate financial results. Again, remember, this is a first of its kind platform that allows you to mix and match data from different systems. So you're not just looking at human capital data, you're not just looking at financial data, you're looking at the combination of the two. And then hopefully that will generate some benefits for you in terms of inputs into decisions around the kinds of programs you want to manage, change, introduce, or retire. So one other thing that I want to mention is we ask that you provide or you upload data on a monthly basis. And to help you with that, we can actually create APIs into your system if you would like that. We've done it with other organizations. It's very easy to do. And what happens is your systems create the data as a report, and our system locates where that data is and automatically uploads it into our system. So you don't even have to do any more data uploads. The data will automatically populate month by month should you decide that you want to use the API system. Otherwise, we make it pretty easy for you to upload your data on a monthly basis.
And thank you, Solange. I think for the purposes of our call today, one of the things that will happen when we start to get people into the system is that there's a very simple upload. I know that you don't want attachments to a spreadsheet or attaching a spreadsheet to an email or anything else that's not secure. So even if they don't want to go down the API route, which many corporations, that may not be something that they want to embrace, but it is very simple to upload the data on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on the granularity that they'd like. So thank you for offering that. So that's a lot to unpack, and that's a lot of really great opportunities. And so let's get started. So when you look at the MyTCB, and you saw this slide earlier, you go to data and benchmarking, you click on the HCMetrix site, it will then take you to the next layer here, and you'll recognize the verbiage at the top, which I shared earlier, as well as the slide that Solange shared. And you'll click in here where you see that it's highlighted, and that's to access the benchmarking tool. So this takes you over to the HC Moneyball site. And so you will have a secure login. Now, the 2 seats that each organization has, we'll deal directly with them. They would log in, they'll have a special code, they'll log right in. And what you have here then is really getting into the HC Moneyball platform. And on the next slide, Solange, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit. There's a great repository of tools and support that you're providing for all of the folks who are accessing the platform. Would you just share a little bit about some of them?
Sure. So when you get past the login process, you'll end up in the HCMetrix site. If you are the primary user, then you'll see 3 tabs. If you are the second seat, you will not have access to uploading data. You will have access to all the data that's been uploaded, but we want to control the quality of the data that gets uploaded into the system. So each seat has its own specific role. In any event, when you log onto the system, you'll be able to see this tab that's highlighted called Help Documents. And we've created 3 different types of help documents for you. The first type of document is the detailed documentation. So these are the big user manuals. They're electronic format, so you can just download them and search for keywords. It'll take you wherever you need to go. I think we've done a really good job in making this user-friendly and understandable, but this is the main subscriber onboarding data. So as you're onboarding, you'll want to follow this. We have a document with data definitions. So if you don't know what HCCF is, or you don't remember what HCROI is, or HEVA, all of the data definitions are defined in this document. And we've also given you some documentation on how to complete the data collection form. So that's all there. It should be very easy to follow, very user-friendly. We've also created some quick guides for you. So they aren't big documents, they're little snapshot documents. And these documents are the quick navigation guide. So you know how to navigate the user interface, building analytics. And I'm going to show you a slide in a second on how easy it is to build the analytics. So it's really about how you do that with the drag and drops. And then the third is dashboard display function. So when you create a dashboard, there's lots of things that you can do to customize that dashboard. And so we've given you some guides on how to do that.
That's great. I think you have one more slide that shows what the primary user would see.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me talk about this last set of user documents and their case studies. So if you don't really know where to start, you can go to those documents and it'll give you sort of a little bit of a blueprint on some of the things that you should be looking at to gain some insights. If you are the primary user, you're going to see this tab here that's highlighted called File Upload. When you land into the system, when you get past the login page, you'll want to go here first. You just click on the Excel template file, and that will download for you the template that you will use to populate your Excel spreadsheet. And then when you've got it populated, you're going to click on the Upload Data file right here. It'll tell you, it'll prompt you to attach the file. It'll go right into our system, and we'll use that as the basis. We actually clean the data. We look for any anomalies. We might come back and ask you some questions if we find something that is unusual. And once the data is uploaded, you're off and running. You're ready to use the system. The whole process from the time you upload the data until the time that you can start using your data is usually about a day. My tech guys like me to say it's 2 days, but I know that they work pretty quick. So, and we'll let you know when your platform is ready to use. The last thing I wanted to show you quickly is what the create a dashboard area looks like. And there'll be a place where you can say, add a chart. And as you can see here, it says edit my dashboard, add chart. And basically your data collection worksheet will be identified here. You'll enter a label for the dashboard that you want to create. And then you'll use these drop-down menus. As you can see, I've dropped down the financial data. You just hover over the information that you want. You left click, and you just drag it right into this area. And you can you can drag and drop as many indicators as you want. And when you hit save the data, it will take you back to your landing page, and it will draw that dashboard for you. It's just that easy.
Well, that's terrific, Solange. I think this is exciting, and I know many people are anxious to get started. And so the first place to start would be to reach out to either Steve Economy or to M.A. Moran. Both are the directors of member engagement for the hundreds of Human Capital Center member organizations. And they can confirm for you who on the team we've reached out to. Most always, though, it is your CHRO, and determining who's best on the team to take advantage of the 2 seats per organization. So that'd be the first place to start. And then once you are in the process of being onboarded and getting started in the HCMetrix platform, you do have a team of dedicated folks, and Kim Hoover would be the main point of contact there. And you can see that Kim is available through a variety of means. And so that's the way we hope that you'll be able to take advantage quickly of this incredible tool. It is unique, and it is something that I'm so pleased to have partnered with Solange Shiras and the HC Moneyball team to bring to you as a benefit of your membership. So with that, we'll say goodbye and thank you for joining us and listening. And please do reach out and let us know how we can continue to support the important work you do in human capital. And I want to thank you again, Solange, for joining me today, as well as the incredible, generous partnership you and the team. Thanks again now.